The lobby of the Rive Grand was the kind of space that had been designed to make ordinary people feel smaller. 12 floors of guest rooms above it. A ceiling hung with 3 chandelier clusters that the maintenance log described as requiring individual bulb checks every 14 days. A marble floor that David had once calculated absorbed approximately 800 footsteps an hour during peak check-in, and that she had watched cleaned by hand on 4 separate occasions, because the automatic buffer left a film near the columns that showed under the afternoon light. She was standing near the 3rd column from the east entrance when she heard it. A name, said by a man in a regional director's badge who had come through the main doors with the particular walk of someone who has been travelling since before dawn and has finally arrived where he needed to be. Marcus, the man said, and then he said the rest of it, the full name, and every syllable landed on the marble and spread outward the way sound moves in a room with no softness left to absorb it. David stood very still. She had spent the last 8 days carrying towels up to that man's suite. She had sat on the floor of his bathroom and replaced a leaking valve cartridge with a basin wrench and a flashlight held in her teeth, because the overhead light in the service closet outside the suite had blown 2 days prior, and she had not yet had time to replace it. She had handed him coffee from the service trolley on the 3rd morning, and he had said thank you in the way that people say it when they mean it, which was different from the way most of the guests on the 12th floor said it, which was not at all. She had told Owen everything she thought about the way this hotel was being run, in a phone call she had believed was private, in the suite she had believed was empty. She had been wrong about the empty part. The story did not begin in the lobby. It began 7 years earlier when David Thompson was hired as a junior maintenance technician by the Rive Grand on the strength of a single interview and a demonstrated ability to rebuild a pump motor with the components sourced from 2 separate, broken units. She had been 26. She had known how buildings worked the way some people know how languages work, with an instinct that ran ahead of the formal vocabulary. 7 years was long enough to know where every pipe ran in the building. It was long enough to know that the ice machine on the 7th floor had a compressor that would seize if the ambient temperature in the service corridor dropped below 46 degrees, and that the ambient temperature in the service corridor dropped below 46 degrees every February without fail, and that this information was in the maintenance log every February without fail, and that nothing had been done about it because the budget for insulation was held at the general manager's discretion, and the general manager had other priorities. The general manager was Claudia Hart. She had been at the Rive Grand for 4 years, arriving with credentials from a larger property in a city that she mentioned often enough that the name of that city had become a kind of private joke among the staff, though no one told the joke where she could hear it. Claudia ran the hotel on a theory of visible excellence. Lobby flowers changed every 2 days. Uniforms inspected at the start of every shift. Guest-facing staff trained to smile in a way that involved the eyes as well as the mouth, a specific instruction she had given in the orientation document David had been handed, and read with the mild interest she gave most documents that had nothing to do with load-bearing structures. What Claudia did not run well, in David's experience, was the building itself. The ice machines seized in February. The 3rd floor HVAC made a low, intermittent knock that 2 separate contractors had attributed to duct expansion, and one had correctly identified as a failing damper actuator. And the correct assessment had not been acted on because the correct assessment was the most expensive one. The service elevator on the east wing ran slow because the cable tension had not been adjusted in 3 years, and David had written this up in the maintenance report, and Claudia had written back a single line. Acceptable for service use. David had initialed the response and filed it, and continued to do her job. She had a small office off the basement corridor with a window that looked onto a concrete utility wall. The window was frosted, so the light came through, diffused and colourless, like the light in a room that has been sealed for a long time. She kept the office organised, a wall of labelled binders, a whiteboard with the week's open work orders, a single personal item on the desk that was a photograph of the coastline near the town where she had grown up, taken from a cliff above the water. She had put the photograph there on her first week and had not moved it since. Owen Park worked the front desk on the morning shift and had done so for 3 of David's 7 years. He was younger than her by several years and had a cheerful persistence about him that she had come to appreciate in the same way you appreciate a reliable transit line. Not exciting, but there when you needed it. Owen noticed things. He was the one who had told her on the Monday of what turned out to be a significant week that a guest had checked into suite 1214 under the name M. Calloway. Long stay, Owen said. 8 days, business rate, personal card, not a company account. Asked for extra towels and a second phone charger. David filed this information in the part of her mind that tracked guest requirements and moved on. Suite 1214 was the largest unit on the top floor, the one the hotel reserved for guests whose comfort required particular attention. The suite had its own service protocol, twice daily linen checks, daily maintenance walkthrough, and a standing instruction in the system that any issue in the room was to be addressed within 40 minutes of report. The maintenance issue that sent David to suite 1214 on that Monday afternoon was a leaking valve in the bathroom. The report had come in at 2:15. She arrived at 2:47, which was within the 40-minute window, and knocked twice on the door before using the service key. The guest was not in the room. She found the valve without difficulty, set her bag down on the tile floor, and got to work. The valve was corroded at the seat, which was older work than it should have been for a suite of this grade, and she made a note of it in the back of the small notebook she carried in her breast pocket. The replacement took 18 minutes. She tested the seal, ran the tap, checked for drips, found none. She was closing her bag when the door opened. The man who walked in was about 40, she estimated, with the kind of face that rested in a neutral expression that could read as either calm or tired depending on what you brought to it. He was wearing a plain jacket over a dark shirt, no tie. He had a hotel keycard in his hand and a paper coffee cup that had come from somewhere other than the hotel's coffee service, which she registered because the hotel's coffee service used a particular cup with the Rive Grand logo on the sleeve. He stopped when he saw her. "Sorry," she said, which was automatic. She stood and gestured at the bathroom. "Valve replacement. You're all set. The hot tap should be running normally now." He looked at the bathroom, then back at her. "The cartridge was original," she said, because she always explained things and she had never found a good reason to stop. "Whoever sourced the fixtures for this room went with a mid-grade seat that was fine 10 years ago. It gets brittle. I've noted it in the system. If any of the other taps start losing pressure, it'll be the same cause." He nodded once. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, level and unhurried. The cup in his hand did not move. "Have a good evening," she said, and left. She did not think about the encounter again until the following morning, when she was crossing the lobby with a work order in her hand, and a man she did not know stepped off the elevator and turned his ankle on the edge of the decorative runner at the base of the east staircase. She was 6 feet away. She moved before she had decided to move, catching his elbow to keep him upright, and he stood for a moment, collecting himself, while she checked the runner's edge, found it had lifted at the corner where the adhesive had released, and put her boot on it to hold it flat. "That needs to be taped before the next person comes through," she said, mostly to herself. The man who had steadied himself was Marcus, the guest from suite 1214. He said, "Are you all right?" And she looked up from the floor and said, "I didn't fall, you did." And he said, almost to himself, "Yes, I did." and something in the way he said it was dry enough that she almost smiled. She pulled a roll of temporary grip tape from the side pocket of her bag, cut a length with the utility scissors, and secured the runner's corner. It was not a permanent fix. She wrote a work order for the adhesive replacement and put it in the system while she was still crouched on the floor, using her phone. When she stood, he was still there. "You should wear better shoes for marble," she said. It was not a particularly kind thing to say. It was the thing she was thinking. He looked down at his shoes, which were ordinary leather lace-ups in good condition. "I'll take that under advisement," he said. She walked on. That evening, Claudia called a staff assembly. Full attendance, lobby level, 7 o'clock. David came up from the basement, still carrying the work order she'd been completing when the call came through, and she stood at the back of the cluster of assembled staff and waited. Claudia stood at the head of the room in the way she stood everywhere, as though the geometry of any space automatically arranged itself to put her at the front. She had a printed document in her hand, which she did not look at because she had already memorized it. "We have received a formal complaint from a guest on the 7th floor," Claudia said, "regarding noise from a maintenance procedure carried out yesterday evening. The procedure was unsanctioned. The work order was filed after the fact." She looked across the assembled staff. David registered her name in the room the way you register a light switched on in a dark space. "The work order for the 7th floor compressor check was not authorized before 6 p.m., Claudia said. "I have the timestamps. The noise complaint was filed at 6:40. The work order was filed at 6:53. "The compressor check was logged as pending," David said. "I had a window after my last call. The compressor seizes in cold weather. February is in 2 months. "That is not the authorization process," Claudia said. Her voice was not raised. Raised voices were not Claudia's method. Her method was the cool, level tone of someone who has already decided and is merely narrating the decision. "The authorization process exists for a reason. In future, you will follow it." She said the word "you," the way people say it when they want the room to hear which person they mean. David said nothing. She looked at Claudia and held the look for a moment, and then she looked at the middle distance, which was a habit she had when she was deciding whether a thing was worth saying. It was not. "Understood," David said. The assembly ended. People dispersed in the way of people who have been witness to something they would rather not have seen. Owen appeared beside her as she was walking toward the corridor. "That was about the compressor?" he said. "Yes." "The one that's been on the pending list since September?" "Yes." Owen looked at the floor for a moment. "She never mentioned the 7th floor guest registered no noise complaint last Thursday when you did the same check." "I know," David said. "Are you going to say something?" "I already did," David said. She meant it simply. She opened the door to the basement corridor and went back to work. The week continued the way weeks in a managed building continue, which is with a steady accumulation of small problems and the requirement to solve them in a specific order. She replaced the overhead light outside Suite 1214's service closet on Tuesday, which she had written up 2 days prior. On Wednesday, she was assigned the daily walkthrough of the suite because the junior technician who usually covered the 12th floor had called in sick. The suite was occupied, but the guest was not there. She moved through the rooms in the methodical pattern she used for every space, which started at the door and worked clockwise, covering utilities first and finishes second. The bathroom was clean and dry, the valve she had replaced performing correctly. The main room had a work setup at the desk, a laptop, a legal pad covered in handwriting, 2 pens, a physical folder with a tab she did not read. The room was lived in, but not disordered. She was replacing the towels in the bathroom when she heard the main door. She came back out with the folded stack under her arm and found Marcus setting his coffee cup on the desk, the same kind of cup from outside the hotel. "Still the outside coffee," she said without thinking. He looked at the cup. "The hotel's is fine," he said. "The one across the street is better." She set the towels on the end of the bed. "I can write that in the feedback system if you like," she said. He looked at her. "Does that work?" "It goes into a report that goes to the general manager," she said. "So, probably not." There was a small pause in which he appeared to be weighing something. "Has it ever worked?" "Once," she said. "Mattress in room 412. Guest submitted a request. I submitted a maintenance note. She ordered the replacement. It took 11 months. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was close. "That's your benchmark," she said. And she meant it as a joke, but it came out level, the way most things she said came out, and she picked up the service bag. "The valve is holding," he said. "I know. I checked it." She was at the door when he said, "Do you always explain what you're working on?" She thought about it. "Yes," she said. "Most people in these rooms have no idea what keeps the building running. It seems like information they might want." He turned back to his legal pad. "Most people in these rooms," he said, "don't usually get the chance to find out." She left. On Thursday evening, a guest in Suite 1213 called down to report that his television remote had lost connectivity. David was the technician on call. She went up, resolved the pairing in 3 minutes, and was walking back past the service entrance to 1214 when her phone rang. It was Owen calling from downstairs. "I wanted to warn you," Owen said without preamble. "Claudia's been talking to Hartwell." Martin Hartwell was the guest satisfaction coordinator, a man whose title exceeded his actual authority, but whose paperwork could create genuine inconvenience. "She's putting together a formal note about the compressor incident." "A formal note," David said. "She's framing it as a pattern. Unauthorized decisions, failure to follow the authorization chain." Owen paused. "She used the word independent to the point of insubordination." David looked at the wall across from her. The paint on the service entrance door was chipped at the handle. She had written that up in April. "I'm not surprised," she said. "You should be worried," Owen said. "I know what I did and why I did it," David said. "The compressor check was necessary. I can demonstrate that it was necessary. If she wants to make it formal, it becomes formal, and I demonstrate it." "David!" Owen sounded tired. "That's not how she works." "I know how she works," David said. "I've watched her for 3 years." She did not know, in that moment, that the door to Suite 1214 was not fully latched. She had not checked it on her way past. The suite's ventilation shared a duct run with the service entry, and the wall between them was older construction than the rest of the floor, the result of a renovation that had merged 2 smaller rooms. Sound carried through older construction in ways that newer walls did not allow. "She's not good at this job," David said. "I don't mean that as a criticism of her personally. I mean it as a factual statement about the management of this building. The 7th floor HVAC damper has been wrong for 2 years. The East Service elevator cable hasn't been tensioned since I was junior staff. The ice machine note is in the log every February and every March. She runs the lobby beautifully, and she treats the building behind the lobby as though it doesn't exist. And one day something is going to fail because of that, and the failure is going to happen in front of a guest, and it's not going to matter how perfect the flowers were." Owen was quiet for a moment. "You know, that felt good to say," he said. "Don't repeat it," she said. "Who am I going to repeat it to?" She said goodnight, and put the phone away and walked to the service elevator and pressed the button for the basement and waited the extra 4 seconds the slow cable always took before the doors opened. She did not know that Marcus had been in his room the entire time. She did not know that the door had been slightly ajar because he had stepped into the entry corridor to look for something in the coat closet and had not pulled the door fully shut on his return. She did not know that the service duct carried sound clearly, that the renovated wall was thin, or that he had stood very still in the entry of his suite for the length of her phone call, without moving toward the door or away from it. She did not know any of this. She went back to the basement and finished the work order for the remote pairing, and put it in the system and turned off the lights in her office at 9:45. The next day was a Friday. The daily suite assignment brought her to 12:14 again. She let herself in with the service key, moved through the room, and was changing the filter in the ventilation unit above the desk when she heard the shower in the bathroom. The guest was in. She kept working. The filter swap took 6 minutes. She was done by the time the shower stopped. He came out in a clean shirt, saw her on the stepladder above the desk, and stopped. "Ventilation filter," she said. "Monthly schedule." He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his phone for a moment. "Does the filter affect the sound?" he said. She stepped down from the ladder. "The duct draws better with a clean filter. You'd hear less of the building's ambient noise." He looked up from his phone. "I hadn't noticed any." "You wouldn't," she said. "You've been here less than a week." She folded the stepladder. "It's subtle. After 8 or 9 days in a room, people start to register the building as background. They stop sleeping as deeply." He was quiet. Then he said, "What would fix it? Long term?" Properly tensioned service elevator cable would remove about 30% of the low vibration in the east wall rooms. Sealed duct joints in the upper corridor would cut the ambient draw noise. The damper actuator on this floor's HVAC unit is slipping, which produces a very low knock every 7 to 12 minutes between midnight and 5 a.m. when the system cycles. Most guests don't consciously hear it. They feel it. He looked at her steadily. "How long have those things been wrong?" "The elevator cable, 3 years. The duct joints, probably 4. The actuator, 2. She picked up the old filter in its sealed bag. "They're all in the maintenance log." He did not say anything else, and she left him in the room with the daylight coming through the curtains and his phone still in his hand. That afternoon, Claudia called David to her office. The office was on the 2nd floor, a corner room that overlooked a small interior courtyard, planted with the kind of ornamental shrubs that require very little water and provide very little colour. Claudia was at her desk when David arrived. The desk was clear except for a single folder and a cup of tea. "Close the door," Claudia said. David closed it. "I'm going to be direct with you," Claudia said. She was always direct in the sense of saying directly what she had already decided. The pattern of incidents over the past several months suggests that you have difficulty operating within the authorization structure of this property. The compressor check is one example. The cable tension report was submitted outside the capital review cycle, which made it impossible to action this year. The duct joint survey you requested in August went to facilities review without my sign-off. "I didn't know it required your sign-off," David said. "It was a routine survey request." "Every survey request over $2,000 requires my sign-off," Claudia said. "This is in the operating procedures document." "The procedures document was updated in March," David said. "I read the original." "Then you should have read the update," Claudia said. David looked at the folder on the desk. She did not ask what was in it. "I'm putting a formal letter of concern in your file," Claudia said. "I want you to understand that this is not a punitive measure. It is a documentation of a pattern that I need to be able to reference if the pattern continues." "I understand," David said. "I hope you do," Claudia said, and her voice carried the faint warmth of someone who is performing concern. "You've been here a long time. You know this building very well. I would like to find a way for that knowledge to operate within the appropriate structure." David said nothing. She looked at the cup of tea, which was cooling on the desk between them. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Claudia said. "No," David said. She walked back down to the basement. The work order queue had 3 new items since the morning: a stuck window latch on the 4th floor, a heat lamp out in the 3rd floor spa changing room, and a reported drip from the supply line in the 8th floor utility closet. She went up to the 4th floor first, then the 3rd, then the 8th. The utility closet on the 8th floor had a supply line that ran to the 2 guest rooms on either side. The reported drip was, when she found it, not a drip at all, but a failing joint compression that was seeping rather than leaking, which was worse in the long run because it would spread laterally through the adjacent drywall before it made itself apparent from the front. She clamped the joint, packed the compression, and wrote it up for a full replacement within 30 days. She noted in the work order that if the replacement was delayed past 30 days, she would need to open the wall to check for drywall saturation. She noted that the repair authorization would need to go through Claudia's office. She timed herself out of the job at 7:40. Her shift had ended at 6. She put her tools away in the basement cage, locked it, and stood for a moment in the corridor with the fluorescent light humming above her. She did not go home immediately. She sat on the stool at her workbench and finished the written notes from the utility closet inspection because she wrote things by hand before she put them in the system, and the habit had served her well enough that she had never stopped. She wrote, "Joint compression failure, 8th floor supply line, East Run. Clamp and pack applied. Replacement required within 30 days. Lateral moisture risk if delayed. Refer to authorization process per GM directives, March update." She wrote it in the same careful hand she used for everything. Then she turned off the light and walked to the east exit and took the bus home. Saturday was her day off. She spent the morning at home, which was an apartment 15 minutes from the hotel in a building that did not share the Rive Grand's interest in visible excellence, but had very good bones and plumbing she had never needed to touch. She drank coffee at the kitchen table and read, and did not think about the hotel until the afternoon, and then she thought about the joint compression in the 8th floor supply line and whether 30 days was a generous estimate. She went back in Sunday, not because she was called, because she had looked at the timeline in her notebook and decided that if the building was running at normal occupancy and the 4th floor's heat output was higher this week, the lateral moisture spread rate would be faster than her estimate. She wanted to check the reading. The lobby was quiet. A single clerk was at the front desk, a woman named Patricia, who had been with the hotel for 2 years, and who covered weekend mornings with a calm efficiency that David respected. Patricia nodded at her as she came through. "Day off," Patricia said, which was not quite a question. "Supply line check," David said, which was not quite an answer. She went to the 8th floor. She opened the utility closet, checked the clamp, measured the moisture at the drywall seam with the reader she had brought from home. The reading was as she'd expected. Not worse, but not better. She photographed it, noted the measurement in her notebook, and reclosed the closet. She was walking to the service elevator when the door to 814 opened and Marcus came out. She blinked. His suite was on the 12th floor. 814 is standard, she said, before she could stop herself. He looked at her with an expression she could not fully read. "I know," he said. "I wanted to see how the other floors felt." She thought about this. "That's an unusual thing to do," she said. "I have unusual reasons," he said. He was holding the jacket loosely at his side, not putting it on. The 8th floor corridor had the same carpet as the 12th, but the sconces were an older model, slightly warmer, and the light was different enough that she noticed it. "The ventilation on this floor is better regulated," she said. "The ductwork is the original installation from the build. The 12th floor was retrofitted." He looked at the ceiling. I did sleep better. The damper actuator is this floor's version is functional, she said. It was replaced 18 months ago. He put on his jacket. You know every repair that's been done in this building? The ones in the last 7 years, she said. Before that, I have to go by the maintenance records, which are incomplete for the first 2 decades of the property. He was quiet for a moment, in which she became aware that she had told him quite a lot and he had said very little, which was, she realized, how most of their conversations had gone. Is there something that needs fixing on this floor? He said. Supply line joint, she said. I came in to check the moisture reading. On a Sunday. It won't wait 3 more days. He looked at her. Does the manager know you're here? No, she said. He nodded once as though this confirmed something. He said, Thank you for the information about the building. And he said it with a particular care, as though the information was more than information. She did not know what to do with that, and so she did not do anything with it. Have a good morning, she said, and went to the service elevator. She did not see him again until Monday afternoon. Monday was the 8th day of Marcus's stay. David had checked the system that morning, as she always did, and the checkout date for EMSA Callaway in Suite 1214 was listed as Tuesday, which meant today was the last full day. She noted this and moved on to the day's queue, which included a follow-up on the 8th floor moisture reading and a stuck expansion joint on the 4th floor corridor ceiling. Owen caught her at the coffee machine at 9:15. He's staying another day, Owen said with the air of a man delivering minor news that is somehow satisfying to deliver. Monsieur Callaway, she said. Extended to Wednesday. Owen poured his coffee. He called the desk directly this morning. No explanation, he just said he needed 1 more day. David poured her own coffee. Also, Owen said, Claudia's having a guest satisfaction review this afternoon. Hartwell's running it. I think your name is going to come up. She drank her coffee. I know, she said. The guest satisfaction review happened at 3 o'clock in the small meeting room off the 2nd floor conference area. David was present because she was required to be. Hartwell was present with a printed summary. Claudia sat at the head of the table with the same clear desk posture she used everywhere. The guest satisfaction complaint was about the unauthorized compressor check noise. It had been formalized, which David had expected. What she had not expected was that Hartwell had pulled the adjacent complaint records and found that the 7th floor had recorded no noise complaint from the relevant room on the relevant night, a fact that he presented without particular emphasis, the way accountants present arithmetic. Claudia noted that the formalization was about the process failure, not the noise itself. David said that she understood the distinction. Hartwell looked at his summary. The compressor service record shows the unit failed the previous February, he said. The pending service flag was logged in September. I'm aware of the history, Claudia said. The meeting ended without resolution, which was a resolution of a kind. The formal letter of concern remained in David's file. The authorization failure remained documented. The complaint without a complainant was noted in the record. She was back in the basement by 4:15. She had 2 work orders left in the day's queue, the expansion joint on 4 and a final moisture reading on 8. She went to 4 first. The expansion joint was in the ceiling of the 4th floor main corridor, where the building's structural sections met at a seam that moved slightly with temperature variation. The joint compound had cracked, which was normal, and was now showing a narrow gap that would, if left, allow moisture intrusion during the building's next high humidity period. She sealed it from a rolling ladder, working methodically from one end of the seam to the other, which took 40 minutes. By the time she was done, it was 6:20. Her shift had ended at 6. She stood at the base of the ladder and looked at the sealed joint and thought about the 8th floor supply line, which she had already checked twice and knew was not going to fail tonight, and thought about the bus schedule, and thought about the authorization note in her file. She went to the 8th floor. The reading was marginally improved. The clamp was holding. She took the measurement, recorded it, photographed the seam, closed the closet, and locked it. She noted the time in her notebook, 6:51. She wrote the date. She initialed it. She was walking toward the service elevator when she heard the lobby, very faintly, through the stairwell door she had propped open. A voice she recognized, pitched at the particular volume of greeting. She walked down the service stairs to the lobby level and pushed through the fire door. The man in the regional director's badge was saying, "We weren't expecting you until Thursday. The whole team is going to want to. We need to call." And Marcus was saying something low that she could not hear from where she stood. And then the regional director said more clearly, still gripping his arm, "They have no idea you've been walking the floors, Marcus Reeve. You have to know that." Marcus Reeve, yes, the owner of the Reeve Grand Hotel chain. She thought of the legal pad on the desk, the 2 pens, the folder with a tab she had not read, the coffee from the place across the street, 8 days, 12 floors, 1 more day. She thought of the phone call in the 12th floor corridor on a Thursday evening, her voice carrying through old construction and a half-latched door. She stood where she was and let the information settle the way you let a pressure reading settle, giving it time to be accurate. Claudia came through the side door from the conference wing at a fast walk, having received a call, and stopped 3 feet into the lobby when she saw the group near the entrance. David watched her face perform the calculation in real time, the social rank processor running hard. Regional director, known guest, name she was hearing for the first time in this context. Implications. Marcus said something to the regional director and turned. He saw Claudia first, then David. He held David's gaze for a moment. It was a quiet moment, the kind that does not announce itself. Then he crossed the lobby toward Claudia, and the regional director fell into step beside him. And 2 other people materialized from the conference wing entrance who had clearly been waiting. "Ms. Hart," Marcus said. Not cold, level, the way he said everything. "Mr. Reeve," Claudia said, and her voice found the right tone very quickly, because she was good at finding the right tone. "We weren't informed of an ownership visit. We would have prepared." "I know," he said. She waited for something that did not come. "I've been a guest for 8 days," he said. "I've been on 12 floors. I have notes." He looked at the clipboard in her hand. "I'd like to sit down with your full maintenance report as filed, not as submitted for review. The original work order queue, the authorization logs for capital requests going back 3 years. Claudia's clipboard moved slightly in her hand. "Of course," she said. "I'll have everything pulled together." "I already have the maintenance log," he said. "David was kind enough to explain the building to me." Claudia looked at David. It was a look that had always done a specific kind of work. It did not do that work now. David looked back at her and said nothing, because she had never said anything in rooms like this, and she was not about to start. Marcus said, "The maintenance log over the last 7 years is one of the clearest records of what this property needs and what it has not been given. The supply line on 8, the actuator on 12, the elevator cable, the duct joints. All of it written up correctly, all of it in a queue, most of it not actioned." He was not performing, he was stating. "I'd like to understand why." Claudia said, "There are authorization processes that govern." And he said, "I know the processes. I wrote them. I'd like to understand their application here." Owen, at the front desk, was not moving. His hand was on the edge of the counter. David could see him from where she stood. He was watching her. She stood in the lobby in her uniform with the moisture reader still in the side pocket of her bag and the work order notebook in her breast pocket and the 8th floor utility closet key on the ring at her belt, and she did not move because there was nowhere she needed to go. The lobby was the same lobby it had been that morning. The chandelier clusters were the same. The marble floor with its 800 footsteps an hour was the same. The runner at the base of the east staircase had been properly re-adhered on Wednesday with permanent adhesive, because she had put in the follow-up work order on Tuesday and completed it herself. Marcus turned from Claudia to the regional director and said, "I want to schedule a full facilities review, not the submitted reports, the originals." He looked at David. "If you have time, Tuesday morning." She looked at him. He had asked her specifically, not as a formality, but as a question. "Yes," she said. Claudia said quietly and without looking at anyone in particular, "I'll have all the documentation ready." The sentence had lost whatever structure it usually carried. It was just words in the correct order, producing a sound. Later, Owen found David in the basement corridor. He leaned in the doorway of her office and looked at the whiteboard with the week's open work orders, and then at the photograph of the coastline on her desk. "Did you know?" he said. "No," she said. "When did you figure it out?" "In the lobby," she said, "when I heard the name." He looked at the whiteboard. "He was here 8 days." 8 days, she said. He asked about the building. Owen said it as though he was trying to locate where the story had started. "On the first day." "He asked about the valve," she said. "On the first day, I told him it was original equipment." She looked at the work order queue. "I would have said the same thing to anyone." "I know," Owen said. "That's sort of the point, isn't it?" She picked up her notebook and opened it to Tuesday's page, which was blank. She wrote at the top, "Facilities review, full log, original queue." She wrote it in her careful hand. Then she put the notebook down and looked at the photograph on her desk. The cliff above the water. The light that was grey and salt-edged and honest in the way that only outdoor light in that particular part of the world manages to be. The compressor on the 7th floor was going to need its seasonal service in 6 weeks. The supply line on 8 needed a full joint replacement before the month was out. The elevator cable on the east service run had been waiting 3 years and would wait no longer because she was going to write it into the Tuesday agenda with the cost estimate and the consequence timeline, and she was going to present it to the man who owned the building in the same level voice she used for everything, and this time the authorization would come back. She knew it would. She did not know it the way you know a guess. She knew it the way she knew when a pressure reading was accurate, which was because the data was correct and she had measured it herself. She turned off the office light and walked to the east exit. The door to the street was heavy, and she opened it with her shoulder the way she always did, stepping out into the cool air of a Monday evening with the notebook under her arm and the keyring at her belt and the bus stop visible across the street. She crossed to it. She waited. The bus came, as it always did, and she got on.